August 8, 1960, 3:30 a.m. The dead of night. A Royal Mail train, packed to the brim with letters and parcels, is hurtling down the tracks from Glasgow to London. Suddenly, the screech of brakes pierces the silence. The massive iron beast grinds to a halt. For the postal workers inside, it seems like a routine signal failure, a brief delay in an otherwise ordinary shift. But as the minutes agonizingly tick by, a creeping sense of unease sets in. When a worker finally pushes open the carriage door to investigate, he isn't greeted by the heavy steel of the next train car. Instead, he stares out into the cold, empty void of the tracks. The front carriage, a high-value rolling vault carrying over £2.6 million in cash, has completely vanished into the darkness, taking the locomotive with it. For decades, this rail line had never lost a single penny. Tonight, a flawless, terrifyingly brilliant master plan has just been set into motion. The mastermind behind this phantom heist is none other than Bruce Reynolds. On the surface, he looks like a tailored gentleman, but beneath the sharp suits and polished demeanor lies the calculating mind of an apex predator. Life had dealt Bruce a brutal hand from the very start. Losing his mother at just 4 years old, alienated by a resentful stepmother, and kicked out onto the unforgiving streets of London by his own father at 14, Bruce grew up like a lone wolf. After failing to join the Royal Navy and drifting through a series of dead-end jobs, he discovered his true calling in the criminal underworld. Graduating rapidly from petty station thefts to orchestrating high-stakes burglaries, Bruce became the undisputed leader of the notorious Southwest Gang. He never saw himself as a common thug. He dined in five-star restaurants, drove luxury sports cars, and harbored a singular consuming obsession to orchestrate the perfect, untouchable crime. While hunting for a target worthy of his ambition, a golden tip falls into his lap from a corrupt senior postal worker. Thanks to a Scottish bank holiday, the night train on August 8th wouldn't be carrying its usual £300,000. Instead, an astronomical backlog of untraceable cash is piled up, swelling the vault to a staggering £2.6 million. A high-speed fortress of cash cutting through the pitch-black countryside, and incredibly, not a single upgraded security system is active on that carriage. It is the opportunity of a lifetime. Bruce swiftly assembles a covert strike team of 15 elite specialists to pull off the greatest robbery in British history. They meticulously plan every second, anticipating every variable. But there is a fatal flaw in his brilliant design. What Bruce and his crew believe to be the ultimate, foolproof payday is, in reality, an unstoppable express train driving them straight into a living nightmare. The preparation was nothing short of military grade. Reynolds had assembled a highly specialized crew of 15 men, including a retired train engineer, an elite getaway driver, and even a florist. To anchor their operation, they purchased a secluded hideout known as Leatherslade Farm. Under the cover of darkness on August 8th, the crew rolled out in ex-army vehicles, moving like ghosts toward Sears Crossing. Every man had a specific role and every second was calculated. They stealthily severed the railway's emergency phone lines and rigged the track's signal lights, covering the green light with an old glove and powering the red light with a hidden battery. It was a phantom stop signal, waiting in the dark. Right on schedule, the massive Royal Mail train came roaring down the tracks. Seeing the red light pierce the blackness, the driver slammed on the brakes. As the heavy engine hissed to a halt, the co-driver jumped out to make a routine call to the nearest station only to find the wires dead. Before he could process the sabotage, a masked figure lunged from the shadows, pinning him down with a chilling whisper, "Shout, and you're dead." Up to this point, the operation was flawless. The gang had sworn a strict oath of nonviolence, aiming for a clean, victimless crime. But that illusion shattered in an instant. When the main driver put up a fierce fight in the cab, panic seized one of the robbers. In a flash of brutal desperation, he swung an iron bar, bringing it crashing down on the driver's skull. Blood poured over the control panel as the man collapsed, severely wounded. The gentleman's heist had just mutated into a bloody armed robbery. So wasting no time, the crew breached the high-value carriage, violently overpowering the postal workers and binding them to the floor. Staring back at the thieves were 128 heavy sacks, bursting with millions in untraceable cash. The next step of the master plan was simple: decouple the vault carriage from the rest of the passenger cars and drive it half a mile down the track to Bridego Bridge, where Reynolds and the transport trucks were waiting. But then a catastrophic twist struck. Reynolds had specifically recruited the retired train engineer for this exact moment. The old man confidently climbed into the blood-stained cab, looked at the controls, and completely froze. He was a veteran of outdated pneumatic brakes. This locomotive used a modern complex vacuum system. He had absolutely no idea how to move the train. The ultimate heist was suddenly paralyzed. With millions of pounds slipping through their fingers and the clock ticking toward dawn, they had only one horrific option left. The robbers dragged the bleeding, half-conscious driver off the floor, propped him up against the controls, and forced him to drive his own hijacked train. Driven by sheer survival instinct, the battered driver managed to inch the carriage to the bridge. A human chain of thieves frantically unloaded 120 sacks in the pitch black, vanishing into the night and leaving the rest of the train crew completely oblivious half a mile behind. Retreating to Leatherslade Farm, the gang cheered, believing they had just pulled off the impossible. But as they eagerly tore open the sacks to count their massive fortune, they were utterly unaware that a single, seemingly insignificant conversation had already sealed their doom. The euphoria of becoming instant millionaires didn't even last until sunrise. As dawn broke over Leatherslade Farm, the 15 men gathered around a crackling radio, listening to the shockwave they had just unleashed upon the world. Every major newspaper in the country had already plastered the story across their front pages, officially dubbing it the Great Train Robbery. But the thrill of infamy quickly morphed into suffocating paranoia when the broadcast announced a staggering £260,000 reward for any information leading to the gang's capture. With a bounty that massive hanging over their heads, trust instantly became a luxury they could no longer afford. Bruce Reynolds tried to maintain control, insisting they stick to the original plan, lay low at the farm for a few days, let the heat die down, and then quietly disperse. But that illusion of safety was completely shattered by noon. A BBC news bulletin echoed through the hideout with a terrifying update. The police knew the gang had used ex-military vehicles and were actively hunting them down. Panic erupted. In a frantic, desperate bid to hide their tracks, the crew attempted to repaint their olive green army truck yellow. But in a darkly comedic twist of fate, they ran out of paint halfway through the job. They were now stuck with a bizarre half-yellow monstrosity that was infinitely more suspicious. Then came the fatal blow, a twist of their own making that unraveled the entire operation. Listening to the latest reports, the gang heard a detail that made their blood run cold. One of the postal workers from the hijacked carriage had told the police that before fleeing, the robbers explicitly ordered them not to call the cops for 30 minutes. It was meant to be a simple threat to buy them a head start. Instead, it was a catastrophic blunder. Investigators immediately used that 30-minute window to calculate a precise geographic search radius. They drew a strict 30-mile circle around the bridge. Leatherslade Farm sat exactly 27 miles away. The authorities weren't just searching blindly anymore, the net was closing directly around them. Knowing they were sitting on a ticking time bomb, the crew abandoned the farm, fleeing into the city in pairs. They believed they had slipped the noose just in time. But shortly after, a local herdsman, fully aware of the massive cash reward, reported the suspiciously abandoned farm to the police. When investigators raided Leatherslade Farm, they didn't find the robbers, but they uncovered something far more devastating. Scattered among empty mailbags, half-burned clothes, and the botched yellow truck was a forensic gold mine. Despite the gang's hasty attempts to wipe the place clean, detectives pulled a staggering 311 pristine fingerprints from ketchup bottles, tabletops, and a chessboard. The phantoms of the Great Train Robbery suddenly had identities. The unprecedented case was immediately handed over to London's elite flying squad, commanded by Detective Tommy Butler. Butler was a hardened, relentless investigator, a 54-year-old bachelor who worked 7 days a week and lived entirely for the badge. The gang had successfully vanished with the money, but the game had fundamentally changed. Tommy Butler had their fingerprints, he had their names, and he was about to unleash a merciless manhunt that would chase them to the ends of the earth. With Tommy Butler at the helm of the investigation, the walls rapidly closed in on the Southwest gang. The phantom thieves who had pulled off a flawless heist were now making the desperate, clumsy mistakes of hunted men. One gang member tried to rent a house by paying 3 months' rent up front in cash using only old 10-pound notes. Unfortunately for him, the landlady was a police officer's widow, and her immediate suspicions led detectives straight to his door. Another associate, the getaway driver, found himself sprinting across the rooftops of central London in a frantic, losing battle against the flying squad. When Butler finally cornered the gang's stoic treasurer, Charlie Wilson, the criminal remained dangerously arrogant. Wilson smirked at the legendary detective, whispering, You know too much. But you haven't found the money, and without the money, you can't convict me." He would soon be proven dead wrong. By early 1964, 10 of the 16 conspirators had been dragged into the courtroom. Faced with over 600 pieces of forensic evidence, the jury showed no mercy. In a verdict that sent shockwaves through the British underworld, the men were slapped with crushing 30-year prison sentences. But Butler was not satisfied. The mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, was still a ghost. Knowing his face was splashed across every front page, Reynolds sent his infant son away, left a decoy car at the airport, and moved into a borrowed flat in the heart of London. His closest call came one morning when a police officer knocked directly on his door. Panic-stricken, Reynolds and his wife instantly stripped, jumped into bed, and played the part of a couple whose morning intimacy had just been rudely interrupted. The embarrassed officer apologized and quickly left, entirely unaware he had just walked away from the most wanted man in Britain. Realizing his luck was running out, Reynolds shaved his head, secured a fake passport, and bribed a private pilot to fly him out of the country. By the time Butler raided the flat, Reynolds was already sipping champagne in Mexico, living the ultimate criminal dream. Yet, just as the public believed the Great Train Robbery was finally over, an unprecedented twist tore the case wide open again. For the men locked inside maximum security prisons, a 30-year sentence was a reality they simply refused to accept. Charlie Wilson, the arrogant, silent man, was locked in a fortress, checked by guards every 15 minutes, and forced to sleep without clothes to prevent an escape. But on the dead of night in August 1964, a team of masked men didn't just break out of a prison, they broke into one. Scaling a 20-foot wall, they overpowered the guards, unlocked Wilson's cell, and vanished into the darkness before the alarms even sounded. The heist wasn't over. The greatest manhunt in history had only just begun. The audacious prison break of Charlie Wilson severely embarrassed the British government, but he wasn't the only phantom to shatter the illusion of inescapable justice. Ronnie Biggs, a small-time crook who was brought into the heist merely to recruit a backup train driver, decided he was not going to spend 30 years in a cell. 15 months into his sentence, during a routine exercise yard break, Biggs scaled a 30-foot wall, dropped through a specially cut hole into the roof of a waiting furniture van, and seamlessly vanished into the bustling London traffic. While Biggs was embarking on a frantic global flight, the mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, was watching his criminal utopia slowly crumble. Living on the run across Mexico, Canada, and the French Riviera, Reynolds burned through his massive fortune at an astonishing reckless rate. Within 5 years, the Napoleon of crime had blown through millions and was reduced to begging old associates for one last score. Destitute and out of options, he quietly slipped back into London in 1968. But the relentless Tommy Butler had never stopped hunting. On a quiet morning, Butler walked straight into Reynolds' bedroom, ending the 5-year international chase with a chillingly calm greeting. "Hello, Bruce." It's been a long time. Butler's obsessive pursuit eventually brought down Wilson as well, tracking the fugitive to a quiet Canadian town all because of a single intercepted Christmas card. Yet, Wilson's story would ultimately end in blood. Years after serving his time, he was ruthlessly gunned down at his front door, a suspected delayed vengeance tied to the missing millions. But it was Ronnie Biggs who delivered the ultimate, mocking twist to the British authorities. Fleeing across the world, he eventually landed in Brazil, a nation with no extradition treaty with the UK. Biggs didn't just hide in the shadows, he embraced the spotlight. He became a global pop culture phenomenon, giving paid television interviews, recording music, and even hosting paid barbecues for tourists who wanted to meet the legendary fugitive. In a spectacular irony, Biggs legally earned more money from his infamy and life on the run than he ever did from his actual share of the robbery. It wasn't until 2001, after suffering a series of severe strokes, that an elderly Biggs voluntarily returned to Britain to finally face his sentence. Both he and Bruce Reynolds passed away in 2013, taking the deepest secrets of their underworld empire to the grave. To this day, the Great Train Robbery remains an untouchable legend. And perhaps the most haunting twist of all is the math itself out of the staggering two. £6 million violently stolen in the dead of night, police only ever recovered around $340,000. The vast majority of the fortune simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a bloodstained legacy and the myth of the greatest heist in British history.